One of the main things I hear about the NBA today is that the Western Conference is overpowered to a point where it's unfair for the entire league. People on social media always hype up the West, saying that they have way better stars and squads than the Eastern Conference. And look, I know the title of this video is talking about how it's overrated, but I will admit right now the West is better than the East. But I'm also here to tell you guys that it's not that big of a gap, and in general the West is very overrated among NBA fans. It's just not as good as everyone makes it out to be in its current state, and don't get me wrong, everything can change after this season. But for right now, let me break down why I don't think the Western Conference deserves as much glaze as it gets online and on TV. It's only right to start this video off talking about the teams in the Western Conference because they're the reason everyone talks about its strength. The Thunder just had one of the best seasons in NBA history, while Shai Gilgeous-Alexander put himself into all-time discussions with a historic regular season and playoffs. So I will say I'm convinced they could be the NBA's next dynasty. And another team I'm pretty sold on is the Nuggets because they made some massive upgrades by trading for Cam Johnson, acquiring Tim Hardaway Jr., and convincing Jonas Valanciunas to stay in the States. They also have Nikola Jokic, and to me he's the best player in the world, so of course they have a shot to win it all. But besides that, I gotta say I'm not convinced that any other team is a consensus threat at this point in time. Now I know what you're thinking, how can I sit here and ignore the other great teams in the conference? So let me give you guys my concern for the rest of these teams. The main one that I know people will be mad about is the Houston Rockets, and don't get me wrong, this team has the potential to be dangerous. They just got KD, signed Dorian Finney-Smith, and last season they finished as the second seed without these guys. Their young core is one of the best in the league with Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, Reed Shepherd, and Alperen Sengun, so why do I have so many questions? Well, it's because I don't know how much I trust Kevin Durant at 36 years old. No matter what, Durant is going to give you consistent buckets, and I acknowledge that, but I also noticed that with Phoenix, I forgot he was on the court a lot of the time. I would watch him take plays off and defer to his teammates way too much, and I also have a track record on my side when it comes to KD-led teams. Since Golden State, he hasn't done much in terms of winning, and I know it hasn't always been his fault, but it's still something to take note of. So until I see that Houston is clearly a better fit for Durant than the Suns, I'm not going all in. Moving on, there are other top squads in the West like the Lakers, Clippers, Timberwolves, Mavericks, and Spurs that I still have so many questions about. Of course, the Lakers have Luka Doncic and LeBron James, and I know that they only played half a season together, which is why they most likely got bounced in the first round, but they didn't do anything this offseason, and even though he's still great, we can't ignore LeBron's age. If things start clicking and guys step up, then sure, I trust Luka Doncic and LeBron to make a playoff run, but that's a big if considering their surrounding cast. On the other side of LA, Kawhi Leonard's health is never a guarantee, and even though they had a good offseason getting guys like Bradley Beal and Brook Lopez, I'm not sure how far they make it if Kawhi gets injured. Anthony Edwards is in the running for the new face of the league, so I don't have questions about his ability to play winning basketball. But the rest of their roster doesn't necessarily move me, so I'm still waiting to see what they can do. The Mavericks in general have injury concerns with Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving, who won't return until later in the season. And while Cooper Flag could come right in and be a contributing guy, who knows if they'll have the health they need by the time the playoffs come around. And finally, I just think the Spurs are a couple years away. Victor Wembanyama's trajectory is sky high, and De'Aaron Fox is a top 10 point guard in the league. And their young core is also amazing, especially after getting Dylan Harper, but again, I just don't think it's their time. I will also give a shout out to the Warriors, who have been arguably the most consistent West contender for the last 10 years, but I'm gonna be honest. I think they're cooked when it comes to competing for a championship with the roster they currently have. And then I pretty much view the rest of the West that I didn't name as non-contenders or sneaky play-in teams, so let me give my final thoughts about the conference in one word: uncertainty. I absolutely love the NBA and don't want to sound like a hater, but at the end of the day, a lot of people hype up the West when in reality, there are more question marks than surefire contenders in the conference. Now that we broke down the West, I think it's only fair to talk about the other argument people bring up, and that's the idea that it's way better than the East. And like I said in the beginning of the video, I completely agree that at the end of the day, the West has more competitive teams and it's a better conference overall. But there's this narrative floating around that the Western Conference is way better than the Eastern Conference, and I'm sorry, I just don't agree. This upcoming season, that may be true, but I think everyone can agree that it's going to be pretty unfair without the 2024 champs being at full health, and the 2025 runner-ups also in the same boat. But with both conferences at full health, the gap just isn't as big as everyone makes it out to be. The Cavaliers were dominant last season, led by Donovan Mitchell, who is one of the better playoff performers in the league, and the newest defensive player of the year, Evan Mobley. The Knicks trading for Karl Anthony Towns was such a good move to pair with Jalen Brunson, and after adding Jordan Clarkson and Gershon Yabusele this offseason, they're bound for another great year. And I know the 76ers have probably the worst health concern in the league, but if they can find a way to keep Joel Embiid healthy, I can guarantee you they'll be a force in the league. The Orlando Magic are one of the best young teams in the NBA who just locked up their entire young core and added one of the best shooting guards in the game with Desmond Bane. The Atlanta Hawks West got so much better this offseason and should be a threat to win the entire East behind Trae Young. And then we have the Detroit Pistons, who are officially out of NBA purgatory with a great young core and bright future led by Cade Cunningham. By the way, I didn't even mention the Celtics and Pacers, who should still be good even though they're injured. Now, I know most of these teams haven't done much, such as the Magic, who haven't even made it out of the first round with their current team, and the same thing goes with the Pistons, but that's exactly my point. I think both conferences have a bunch of teams who either have a bunch of questions or haven't proved themselves in the playoffs, but for some reason, people want to act like the West is just so much better than the East. I will acknowledge that in the East, it's easier to make the playoffs because a lot of those bottom teams have worse records than they do in the West. But I'm not really making a video to argue about seeds 8 through 15. I'm here to talk about how the West has a bunch of top-end teams that still need to prove their legitimacy. If we take a look at the last 10 NBA champions, 6 of them have come from the West and 4 of them have come from the East, which isn't a large gap at all. And keep in mind, 2 of these last 10 were the Warriors with Kevin Durant, and that team was simply unbeatable. So I don't really hold that against the Eastern Conference. The reason I bring this up is because the narrative that the West is way better than the East has been going on for years, and to me that's just not true. We've seen top teams come from both conferences in recent memory, and in today's league, I just think it's a lot closer than people think. Again, I would give the edge to the West because they do have the most recent champion, and the middle seeding looks to be more competitive, but I don't think they blow the East out of the water. Moving on, another thing I wanted to bring up when talking about the West is the idea of consistency, because I don't think enough people mention it. Obviously, it's tough for teams to be consistently great in the regular season because of roster turnover, injuries, aging, and unforeseen circumstances. But I've seen so many teams in recent memory go up and down the standings in the West that makes me question if these top teams are even going to stay afloat in the rankings. Again, the Nuggets are pretty consistent, and I can't see the Thunder giving up a top 2 seed in the West anytime soon. But outside of that, I get concerned about the rest of the squads and where they could fall during the season. The Timberwolves have been all over the place for the past couple of years, going from an 8 seed in 2023 to a 3 seed in 2024, then back down to a 6 in 2025. The Lakers also keep finding ways to finish as a top 3 to 4 seed that come in the next year as a play-in team. Even though the Clippers have been pretty consistent in that top 5 range, they never do anything in the playoffs, so again, they concern me too. And then a team like the Rockets is just now finding their way back to NBA relevancy since James Harden left. I just find it puzzling that people talk about these Western Conference teams like they're consistent juggernauts when in reality, they keep bouncing around the standings like a pinball machine. And I'm not saying it's a lot different in the East, but that's not the point of this video. We're talking about the West, and how the praise tends to fall their way even though they have so many consistency questions with the roster. Now again, for certain teams, this could be chalked up to injury or making roster moves, and you know what? That's a valid argument. But I think you could also acknowledge how some of their current day rosters have inconsistent lead players, questionable supporting casts, and head-scratching coaching at times. And this would be fine if the NBA community didn't act like the West was a perfect conference and instead talked about how they do have some problems of their own. At the end of the day, I'm just a bench warmer who loves the NBA and wants to start some dialogue. I read TikTok and Instagram comments all day about how the West is a stacked conference without any flaws. And while I agree that they have some great teams, I definitely think there's some questions that people don't bring up. Will the top end talent in the West stay healthy? Can the top teams have a consistent regular season so they're awarded home court advantage in certain games? Do we really believe that these newly created rosters are immediate title contenders? To me, the answer is a big I don't know. This video could end up looking really stupid in 8 months from now, and if it does, I'll take the criticism and move on. But for now, let's pump the brakes on the Western Conference and just see how they perform instead of speculating that they're great.